Good morning, Shinigami viewers, and we are in the process of working on making a big monster, and I want to make a making big monsters video for you today. I'm actually going to do two videos, but that's what this one's going to be about, making big monsters. Right now you are looking at my anycubic Kobra Plus in the process of printing a pair of legs for a giant terrasque for Dungeons and Dragons. And I gotta tell you something, if you want to get into filament printing, I cannot recommend enough this anycubic Kobra Plus. Anycubic does not pay me any suggestions I make on this channel. Nobody pays me nothing. This is just my honest opinion. I fought with the anycubic Chiron for like 6 months to a year. Could never get a pretty looking print. This thing, touch of a button, handled 6 months of fighting. It auto levels, which is the big thing for this thing. The other thing I do, like this is, you're looking at the printer in here. This is a 12 by 12 inch print floor, so you can print decent sized stuff. Not quite as big as the Chiron with its 15 by 15, but losing the pain in the assness of having a lot of leveling issues and failures. This was the move for me. And maybe if the Kobra, this is the Kobra Plus, there's another Kobra bigger, I think it's called the Kobra Max or something. It has a 15 by 15. I've never had my hands on it to recommend it, but I have a feeling the Kobra Max is probably going to be the same situation, especially if it has the auto leveling features that this one does. The other thing that you want to factor in to make a nice clean print for a monster or something like that is consistency, because the PLA chemical, it needs like a consistent temperature to perform correctly. It melts at around 200 degrees Fahrenheit, if I remember correctly, and the print floor needs to stay at 60 Celsius. Sorry, I switched to degrees, but I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head. I can't remember the Fahrenheit for that. Anyway, the print floor needs to stay hot. The print head needs to stay hot. If the temperature fluctuates because cold air blows through your room or whatever, it can cause issues on your prints where they're not quite as clean. So because of that, let me pan it back. Hopefully my camera won't freak out too much. Hey, do you see what we got here? We have a printer enclosure. The Creality brand one just happened to fit this. It was like $100, but just the cleaner prints that it's giving me made it completely worth it. So now we're gonna see what we're actually working on. So we're gonna go over to my desk right now. Don't mind the mess and stuff, because you know, I'm working on 30 things at once. Anyway, this is what we're working on right now. This is a giant terrasque. And what I wanted to show you in particular is, here is the first part of the print that comes off your printer. You know, it's got supports. The one thing I don't, or the only like, the least favorite thing about this printer is, although the prints are clean, the supports are a bit of a bitch to get off. I mean, I have my methods to get them nice and clean, which you will see that I think works satisfactorily. Most of them are removed with a little pair of pliers you see here, so that's dope. We'll take most of the pieces off, and then I also will use like an X-Acto knife to kind of cut some of the little goobers off. That gets most of the stuff to where I'm almost done, but you can see it's still not quite to that point. Like, most of the pieces are off. We're getting there, right? Once you get down to where it's like really kind of being a bitch to get these other pieces off, you then want to switch to using your Dremel. And I use like a combination of like these little bits. I think I actually got these at like a hardware store, like a Lowe's or whatever. And you'll see we've got like, I like this flat head for removing most of the actual supports that are left over here. It's kind of a flat edge that'll just grind those kind of geometrical shapes off to get you down to the actual plastic itself. At that point, then you do have some kind of like scarring you have to get rid of on these that at first was a bit daunting. You can see some maybe on the bottom of that elbow if this camera will focus properly, but that can be cleaned up with some different bits. Like, I have some smaller little tiny guys here for like the tiny little crevices and such. It's like a little spiral chewing bit, which my camera probably doesn't want to focus on. It's really tiny. They're not expensive either. That was a rounded one. Then there's like kind of a flat edge one that will chew, kind of, and then there's like a bigger rounder one. I use a lot of these rounder ones for if I want to make sure I don't leave any lines, but sometimes I do want to leave lines, which we'll go over that in a second. But you get that down to, you know, most of the kind of plastic where you want it to be. And then, oh, well, I guess I can go ahead and touch on the lines next, because I had some, you know, this model itself on the tail, you see it had some kind of muscular striations on the tail. Well, when I removed the supports, those were of course gone. And I actually used one of the Dremel bits with a line to continue that striation. So actually I kind of made it look like there weren't even supports, and kind of continues the pattern on the tail. But the next piece of the puzzle, once you do your kind of sculpting and your shaping to smooth it, you're gonna need like a buffing wheel. I don't know what this thing's called proper. I got a huge bag of them off of Amazon for like $5-10, something like that. And that will basically get a lot of the crap off your prints. You know, and you'll see from the bottom, like, this was heavily scarred, but like you know, I used the Dremel to chew off the chunks, and it was still pretty, like, it had a lot of marks on it on the bottom, and this buffing wheels really, like, got that off of this print to give us a much smoother surface that it's almost like from your viewing on this camera, we probably can't even tell, you know, and even face to face, like, I almost like the way this looks better on the bottom, and I will very often take the buffing wheel and buff some of the top pieces that didn't have supports to just kind of smooth out some places and just give it a nice, almost like a clay sculpted look. Really does a good job. And then, you know, with the assembly in these, what I'll usually do is like the core connections, especially for these large pieces, I'll start out with some Gorilla Glue, like straight up original Gorilla Glue. I'm trying to find my bottle. So here, stuff right here. This is the regular Gorilla Glue. Now, most people don't know with Gorilla Glue that have used it before. You're actually supposed to use water as well. So between the two pieces in the connection, you want to dampen this piece. And then the other connector piece that you connect to it, you put a large drop of Gorilla Glue. That will keep from foaming as bad. It still may foam a little bit, like we got a little bit of foaming on the neck here, but that's okay, you know. You use that for the primary connections. Now, something that my stepdad pointed out that was absolutely fucking genius, because I was like, how am I gonna clamp these pieces together? It doesn't really fit in a vise. And he's like, dude, get some rubber bands. So that's what I'll actually do. I'll get the pieces where they fit real nice. And once I feel like they have a snug enough connection, I'm not gonna have to do too much rework. I'll do the glue, and then I'll wrap it in rubber bands to make sure that the rubber bands are putting pressure where it needs to go to connect these pieces. And then, you know, that's where we're at here. We're still kind of in, you know, assembly mode with this terrasque. But yeah, that's how you get to this point here. You know, arms just came off the printer, legs just started, which is what you were seeing at the beginning of the video. Later on, and I guess I'll probably just need to do another video, and you could kind of see it in my last video with the large back snapper, is you do have some work that you have to do to fill in these cracks. There's a couple ways of attack to do that. Like, you can use super glue and baking soda to fill in some cracks. I've done that on the large back snapper. You can use Tamiya putty. I've used that on the large back snapper. You can use Milliput cut with alcohol to make it a little more liquidy. I've used that on the large back snapper. There's no wrong way in here, but the end result is you want to have like these lines invisible, which when I get done and I'll do a follow-up, these lines will be invisible. Then it will be ready to prime and paint. But that is just the biggest piece of how I do giant monsters and how you can do giant monsters. So I hope this was informative. If you guys like it, I'll make a part 2.